Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for the second installment of the Bruce Trail Conservancy's 2026 Winter Webinar Series. My name is Ryan Mikaloff, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm the Membership Engagement Coordinator here at the Bruce Trail Conservancy and host of today's webinar. It's great to see so many of our members here today. I just want to take a moment to thank you all for your ongoing support as members of the Bruce Trail Conservancy. Thanks to your support, the Bruce Trail Conservancy and the Bruce Trail Clubs can continue to protect and preserve the Bruce Trail and the land it crosses. Today's webinar on fern identification will be presented by my colleague, Rhiannon Carruthers. But just before diving in, I want to go over a few quick things. We'll be recording today's session, and it will be posted to the Bruce Trail Conservancy's YouTube channel. You will all be notified by email once the recording is available. And if you run into any technical issues today, you can use the chat function to message me and I'll do my best to help. Or you can contact me by email at ryan.mikaloff@brucetrail.org. And lastly, if you have any questions, if you have any ideas for future webinars, webinar topics that you'd like to see, you can contact me by my email once again. That's ryan.mikaloff@brucetrail.org. All right. I'm excited to introduce today's presenter. As I mentioned, Rhiannon Carruthers. Rhiannon is currently the volunteer coordinator here at the Bruce Trail Conservancy, but they've spent the past 4 summers working along the Bruce Trail as one of our conservation ambassadors. Some of you may have had the opportunity this past fall to join Rhiannon on their fern hike during the Peninsula Hiking Festival. Today's presentation with Rhiannon, The Fascinating World of Ferns, will be about 45 minutes, and at the end, there will be a Q&A session where you can ask questions to Rhiannon. Rhiannon, thank you so much for being here. Passing over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm very excited to be here today. My name is Rhiannon Carruthers, and I love ferns, and I'm excited to share the fascinating world of ferns with you. The topic or the duration of this webinar will be an introduction to what makes ferns so fascinating, as well as an introduction to how to get started when it comes to fern finding and fern ID. A little bit about me. I, as mentioned, am the Bruce Trail Conservancy Volunteer Coordinator. I've been a conservation ambassador in the Peninsula section for the past 4 years and am excited to be returning this summer. I've led fern finding hikes with the Peninsula Club and am the proud owner of their Fern Finder badge. I've so far identified 32 species along the Bruce Trail and am very excited to expand this number. You can see in this photo that I am absolutely delighted. I am at Rattlesnake Point and I have just found fern species number 32, the ebony spleenwort. And I took this photo shortly after finding it. You can see the joy of ferns. All the photos in this webinar were taken by me unless specifically noted otherwise. So a bit about where my love of ferns began. I have always loved nature. You can see me here finding my first fern. It's a big ostrich fern that was taller than I was. When I first became a conservation ambassador, I didn't have any particular affinity for ferns any more than any other plants. And it was only once I started my role, which involves looking for rare plants along the trail, including the hartstongue fern, that my love and passion of ferns really took off. The Peninsula Bruce Trail Club has the Fern Finder badge. It's this beautiful badge here. You can see it pictured. It says fossils of the forest. It's got a photo of the American hartstongue fern, this rare fern that I mentioned. In order to earn this badge, you need to document 20 different species of fern along the trail in the Peninsula section. Now, I had a fern finding guide and it said that there were 50 plus species found in the area, and we were seeing ferns on the trail every single day. So we thought, how difficult could it be to earn this badge? Turns out it's a lot more difficult than we thought. There's a lot of things to know about ferns when it comes to fern ID. I want to give a big shout out and thank you to our BTC ecologists, Brian and Mara, for sharing so much of their knowledge with ferns and starting this intense passion and love of ferns. We found out we weren't alone in our passion for ferns. There was actually a Victorian era craze known as pteridomania, which was a fern obsession. People wanted ferns decorating their clothes, decorating their furniture, fern motifs in art. We see here people are going out gathering ferns. People would pay top dollar for people to source them rare ferns. So there was really big excitement around ferns. I feel like we're continuing this tradition today, us gathering here to learn more about ferns. It's sort of our own continuation of this fern craze. And there's a really special joy and thrill of discovery when you finally find a rare fern that you've been looking for. I have the pleasure of sharing these photos that were shared with me by our wonderful volunteer, Ruth Moffat, who saw these along the trail. And these are two rare species of fern. And I want to stress throughout this presentation, you don't need to go off trail to find these ferns. These ferns are found right along the trail, and that's one of the things that makes the trail so wonderful. So ferns have long captured the human imagination. They feature prominently in folklore. In Slavic folklore, there's this idea of the fern flower that only blooms briefly on the eve of the summer solstice. Anybody who finds this flower gains the ability to talk to animals as well as good fortune. And we can see some paintings here. Shakespeare also wrote of the invisible fern seeds, which if you held them could render you invisible as well. So we've got this magical concept of ferns that have magical flowers and magical seeds. And what I think is really fascinating is we can actually link this to science. So the science behind the magic. Ferns don't have flowers and they don't have seeds, and instead they reproduce via spores. These spores are microscopic and they were not able to properly study or even observe them until the invention of the microscope. So people came up with these sort of fantastical tales to explain how ferns were reproducing. We're very fortunate in that we now know more about fern reproduction today. Ferns are unique in that they actually have two different structures throughout their lifestyle. What we typically think of as a fern, if we picture a fern, is this leafy sporophyte. So this is the spore producing part of the fern. This is when it matures, will produce spores. Here we can see some clusters of sporangia that are kept together in sori. Once the environmental factors are right, these spores will be released and carried by the wind, hopefully falling on wet soil. When they fall, they will grow into this little heart-shaped plant called a gametophyte. These are very tiny, 2 millimeters, 5 millimeters. And these heart-shaped structures contain both the male and female reproductive structures. So once those are fertilized, it will grow the little sporophyte out of the center of the gametophyte, which will then mature and the gametophyte will wither away. So for this next slide, I'm going to go into a bit about the science of the reproduction of ferns. If you're just interested in finding ferns, don't worry about this next slide. But if you're interested in learning about the reproduction, there's some really interesting parts here. So starting with the mature sporophyte, this is what's known as a diploid generation. So this whole section is diploid, meaning that it has two copies of the chromosome. So as mentioned, the spores are found and created in these specialized structures known as sporangia, which are then clustered together in sori. The sporangia, when the conditions are right, often it's triggered by dryness. So it's in this little cluster and it dries out and breaks open and flings the spores into the wind. They'll often do this when it's dry because the wind allows the spores to be carried further than if they were to fall right down. So now these are what are called haploid in that they only have one copy of the chromosomes. The spore will grow into a gametophyte. Once the gametophyte is matured, then it is able to be fertilized. Uh, Ferns need to grow someplace where it is wet because the sperm does need to actually swim from one gametophyte to another. Once fertilization occurs, that's where we then get the new sporophyte growing out of the gametophyte, and this part will wither away. So again, you don't need to know any of this life cycle in order to enjoy ferns, but it is really fascinating because it's one of the things that makes them different than other plants. Here's a little video that's going to show the spores being released. The amazing thing about these spores is that on a 60-inch fern frond, there can be 7 million spores. So it's a huge amount of spores. And you'll see in this video that they do fling them quite violently. So what we're seeing in this video will be sporangia that are opening up and releasing those spores. So this complex lifestyle is something that evolved hundreds of millions of years ago. There's other vascular plants that also reproduce via spores. These are sometimes referred to as fern allies. Unlike ferns, though, they have these small scale-like leaves rather than the large fronds that we think of with most ferns. Like I mentioned, these are ancient organisms. Oops. They are one of the oldest and most diverse groups of plants on Earth. There are 10,500 documented species, likely more than that. They think there might be upwards of 15,000 species that are found on every continent except for Antarctica, though there have been fossils found on Antarctica. Fossil records, they're dating back 400 million years ago. So these ferns would have been food for large dinosaurs. We have ferns that you can find on the trail today that have not changed in 180 million years. So our cinnamon fern is one of the oldest living species of fern. And then similarly, our bracken fern, two species that you can find on the trail that look exactly the way they did 55 million years or 180 million years ago. So one of the things that makes them so cool. So we know why people love ferns, but I think it's important to talk a little bit about why ferns love the trail. So the Bruce Trail follows along the Niagara Escarpment, which is this incredible geological feature. The Niagara Escarpment, the capstone is what's known as dolostone. Dolostone is a combination of dolomite and limestone. This whole area used to be an ancient seabed, which means that the limestone was formed with the decaying shells and little bits of these sea creatures. So they had calcium carbonate, which makes the dolostone extremely rich in calcium. When the rock weathers naturally, it's releasing this calcium. And a lot of our fern species are what's known as calciphiles, which means that they love calcium. So the Bruce Trail happens to follow along this excellent source of nutrients for ferns. The other aspect of the Niagara Escarpment and the Bruce Trail is that there's lots of forest cover. Forest cover is super important because it provides the shade, the moisture, and the nutrients that ferns need to thrive. Niagara Escarpment similarly has a lot of what's called microhabitats. So even in this photo in the background, yes, it is a forest, but we have a fallen log here. We have boulders over here. There could be cliff faces, all these individual little tiny habitats that provide these specific features that ferns love. Each fern has a different set of requirements and what it wants to be able to thrive. So by having lots of these little different microhabitats, it means that we can have more diverse fern species all within one geographic area. So if we're going out fern finding, what do you want to bring? Uh, the first thing that you want to make sure you bring is a field guide. I really love this one by the Owen Sound Field Naturalists. They've just put out a new edition. One of my favorite things about it is that it's spiral bound, so you can have it open when you're looking for ferns. They also have a checklist, which you can get for free on their website. It's pictured here. I definitely recommend bringing these out with you. I think that they're really great for learning about ferns, checking on your fern ID, etc. Next thing is bringing a little notebook. I think that being able to record almost like a journal of the different ferns you find, being able to make little notes about the joy experienced when you found a new fern, is really great to then be able to look back and see, oh, the first time I saw this fern was 4 years ago. Um, Camera. So if we're going to be taking photos of ferns, we want to make sure that we have a good camera. You can use your camera phone and making sure that you're able to focus on something small. A way to practice with this before you go out is get a coin and see if you can focus on the date of the coin with your phone. Practice before you go out so you're not frustrated in the field. A small magnifying glass that you can clip onto your bag or jeweler's loop can help see some of the smaller details. Bug spray, very important. Ferns share habitat with our mosquitoes and black flies. It's no fun trying to ID a fern while you're swatting away flies. And of course, water and snacks. And I bring an empty bag for the litter I find. I find when you're rooting around looking for ferns, sometimes you find garbage. All right, so steps for getting into fern identification. I find that some people can get a little bogged down if they're trying to memorize all the different identifying features for a fern. I like to think of it as if you're making new friends, the more time you spend with somebody, the more you learn about their likes and their dislikes. And as you build your knowledge over time, you'll be able to recognize them. The same way how if you see a friend from across a crowd, you might recognize them just because of how they carry themselves, what they're wearing. It can be the same thing with ferns. So you'll build this knowledge. Here's two of our conservation ambassadors looking at some sensitive ferns. So we found a fern. The first thing we're going to do is stop and just look around and see where we are, what is around us. So are we in a low, wet area? Is it dry and open? Is there tree cover? Is the fern coming out of a bare rock face? It's on the ground. It's growing out of a boulder. All of these are clues that will help us in identifying the fern. So you can make note of these in your little notebook when you're out in the field. What specifically is the fern growing out of? Is it growing out of rock, either a bare cliff face or a boulder? Is it growing out of a stump? Is it growing directly out of water? There's some ferns that are happy to have their feet wet. There's other ferns that you will not find growing directly out of water. Is it in dry soil? Is it in wet soil? Again, all ferns have different preferences. So as you start to make note of these, you'll start to narrow down what possible fern it could be. So before we even approach the fern and start looking at the individual leaves, still we're looking at them from far away. Are they in a big colony or are they individual ferns? Are they clustered together coming out of sort of one spot or all scattered? And are they standing upright or flopping over? I had a kid tell me that these ferns looked like they were sleepy. So do your ferns look very awake or do your ferns look sleepy? So before we get into IDing the ferns, we need to know a bit about the parts of a fern. So fern anatomy is a little different than other plants. You'll see the terminology is slightly different. We've got roots. So those are what interface with the ground. They keep the fern connected. Uh, Nutrients, water. A lot of our ferns have partnerships with mycorrhizal fungi, which means that they're sharing carbohydrates with the fungi, and the fungi is sharing nutrients from the decaying matter. Next up, we've got the rhizome. You can kind of think of this like a horizontal stem. It will have the roots and the frond growing out of it. The stalk, or you can think of it like the stem, is called the stipe if it's below the blade, and then known as the rachis once it's in the blade. The blade being the part of the leafy part of the frond. If a fern is divided, this is here is what's called a pinna or pinnae if it's plural. And then if that is further divided, we have what are called pinnules. So these are little sub-leaflets. And those pinnules can be toothed or have lobes. A fiddlehead is a young frond that has not yet unfurled. It's important to note that not all fiddleheads are edible, and even the edible kind, if not prepared properly, can cause sickness. This here is a mathematical equation known as the Barnsley fern. Each piece is contained within the whole, which means that this is technically an infinitely divided fern. So this is a fun math concept that relates to the structure of ferns. Fertile spike. So some ferns have sori found in the back of the leaves. Other will have their sori on a separate fertile spike. So if it has a fertile spike, looking at what the shape of that spike is, the ostrich fern looks very much like a ostrich plume. The royal fern looks a little different. And then seeing where the fertile spike is attached. So for our rattlesnake fern, it is attached to the frond, whereas with our grape fern, it comes out a little lower down. So sori shape, if it doesn't have a fertile frond, it will have sori of some kind. We have different shapes of sori that can be really key factors when it comes to identification. The kidney shape on the lady ferns I find really stands out. We've got round is one of the ones that's more typical that you see, but they again come in all different shapes. The ebony spleenwort, I was very excited when I found this one because I'd heard it described as the chevron, but actually seeing it was really exciting. And there's another fern, bulblet bladder fern, that has these little tiny bulbs that can actually are a form of asexual reproduction. So those can break off and form a new fern. Next is sori placement. So are we seeing the sori in the middle of the pinnule? Is it around the edge of the pinnule? Are they really neatly ordered or all scattered? Are they in a dense cluster or more spaced out? Again, all of these things you can be making a note of in your notebook. The stipe and the rachis. So looking down at the base of the fern, seeing if there is hair or scales or wool, or what's known as glands, if it's glandular. We can see here we've got these gold scales and here these black scales. This is the northern lady fern. One of the things that makes it really easy to tell that it's the lady fern is these lovely black hairy legs. I like to joke that there's no razors in the woods, so the lady fern has these lovely hairy legs. Next, we're looking to see, is the stipe wiry or is it round? Does it have a groove in it? Those are all, again, identifying features. And then color. Color is a big one. You can even see with the lady fern how much of more of a pale yellow this is compared to the green here. Our lovely fragile ferns have this nice red color. And we can see the difference between these two types of spleenwort. This is the limestone maidenhair spleenwort, and this is the green spleenwort, so named because it has this lovely green rachis. An interesting thing when it comes to color and ferns, the human eye can actually see more shades of green than any other color. This came evolutionary. It was very important to be able to tell differences between different colors of leaves when it came to eating food in the wild. So you'll start to notice color variances between ferns, and that's something that can also help with ID. Frond shape. Fronds, if you look at the overall shape of the frond, it can be variable. I think it's important to make sure that you're looking at several different fronds. Sometimes they can look a little variable within the plant, so getting sort of an overall gauge of what shape they are. So if they're widest at the base, is it more like this bracken fern that's a nice equilateral triangle? These oak ferns, they are widest at the base, but they are pretty even triangular shape. And then these ones, which can be called diamond shape or tapered at both ends. So it really is widest in the middle. There are many, many frond shapes. So these are just a sample of some of the different shapes that you can see when it comes to ferns. This adder's tongue fern, I would say, is the least fern-like fern. I have not seen it myself. It's on my list to see, but it's one of those ones where you could be looking at it and not even know you were looking at a fern. One of the things that I love about the checklist is it has silhouettes of all of these, which really helps you to figure out what it is that you're looking at. Frond division. So how dissected is it? This is the part that can get a little complicated. Again, looking at multiple fronds and making sure that whatever fronds you're looking at are from the plant you're trying to identify. We ran into something where I was looking at one frond and my trail partner was looking at another one, and we were debating whether it was bipinnate or tripinnate. Then when we traced it back, there were two separate ferns that just were growing right next to each other. So making sure that you are IDing the same fern. If it's simple or entire, we're not seeing any divisions. So this is like our heart's tongue fern or our walking fern. If it's once divided, we're seeing these cuts into the fern. This is what's called pinnatifid, in that these are not separate. We can see that they're all attached still to the rachis here, compared to what's known as pinnate. We can see that this is not attached right to the rachis. Now, if these pinnae are then further divided, we get what's called bipinnate. This one, you can see it is attached, so I would actually say that this one is pinnate pinnatifid. And then if it's further divided again, so we've got the pinnules here that are then divided further, and then you can see that they're even lobed along the edge here. That's what's called thrice divided. Now, looking at the actual edges of either the pinnae or the pinnules, we want to see, is it smooth? So this is a royal fern, which has this beautiful smooth edge. Is it auricled, which means that it has this earlobe? So this comes from the word for auditory, auricled. Does it have this little ear? Is it lobed? So these little bumps along the edge, or is it toothed? So it's got these little points on it. This will all help you with identification. So in your notebook, you've written down where you are, what the habitat is like, what the overall shape is like. Is it standing up? Is it lying down? You've noted if it has a fertile spike or if it has sori and what shape, size, and layout those sori are. You've looked closely at the stipe or the rachis. You've looked at the overall frond shape, and you've looked at the divisions and then the actual edges of the pinnules. So I find on a bright sunny day that the great way to practice looking at shapes and divisions is to actually find fern shadows. So it's the same thing how the checklist works is it's the silhouettes. You can see here that oops, is not, it's once divided, pinnate, pinnátifid here because it is still attached. We can see that this one is more divided. So having shadows like this can really give you an idea of the fern without being too distracted by the leaves. Here we can see this is a nice long fern. You can see that it's got that really wide base and then tapers. So it's a good way just to practice looking at ferns. iNaturalist. So some of you may have heard of iNaturalist. It is a community science database that's used to track and identify species. For anyone who isn't familiar, community science is this idea that everyday people can help with scientific research and conservation. The Bruce Trail Conservancy has just two ecologists for all of the lands that we manage, but we have people who are out on the trail every single day. So when those people can submit photos to the Bruce Trail iNaturalist project, those are then seen by our ecologists. It can help when it comes to choices around conservation and trail routes, etc. So you can use iNaturalist in several different ways. You can use it to record your own observations. It's a great way to keep track of what ferns you've seen. And it can be used for any species, animals, plants, mushrooms. It doesn't have to just be for ferns. You can get help with your identifications from experts. So part of how I learned more about Fern ID was I was submitting to iNaturalist and I had a very helpful Fern expert let me know that I was missing photos of some of the key features. So I was able to go back and the next time I was submitting, make sure I had photos of everything that was required to be able to tell what fern it was. You can access observational data collected by other users. I've used this more when I was looking for my orchid badge to look at specific sightings for different orchids along the trail. You can use it for ferns too. If you want to know where people have seen maidenhair spleenwort, you can look it up using iNaturalist. If you have a rare fern and you post it to iNaturalist, it will automatically be obscured, the location, and this is just a way to protect any rare species. So if you have iNaturalist, please join the Bruce Trail Conservancy project. If you are posting anything found along the trail, you can add it to our project and that will be seen by our BTC ecologists. When you're making a research grade iNaturalist post, so what it means when it says research grade is that it has the adequate information as well as 2/3 consensus from iNaturalist users that this is an accurate observation. That then means that scientists, researchers, conservationists can use that data point in any of the work that they're doing. So if somebody's studying where ferns live, they're able to then use the fern that you saw as a data point to say this is the fern's range. So you're actually helping science by adding things to iNaturalist. So for what did you see? If you know for sure 100% that it is a spinulose wood fern, you can put that in. If you're not sure and you know that it's a wood fern, but you don't know which, you can just put the genus Dryopteris. And if you know, hey, this is a fern, but I don't know what type, you can just put ferns. It's really important not to guess. If you put in a guess and it's wrong, and then somebody else puts in the right answer, your wrong guess is weighted the same as the correct answer. Whereas if you put it to your best knowledge, you know it's a wood fern, and then somebody comes in and puts in the correct species, then that doesn't count against each other because they're agreeing with you and just getting more specific. So it's really important not to guess, but to put it as far along in the classification as you are. You could just put plants. I know it's a plant, but I don't know what kind. Time and date. This is important when it comes to seasonality. There's certain ferns that will be at different stages at different times of the year. So knowing when something was taken is really helpful, similar with location. If you don't have location and date, your post will not be shown to other users, which means that you're not going to get feedback on your post. People aren't going to be able to help figure out what it is. So it's very important that you keep the location and the date. If it is seen along the trail, please add it to the Bruce Trail Conservancy project. And make sure that your photos are clear and detailed. Sometimes I will have people ask me, I posted to iNaturalist and nobody ever responds or comments on my posts. It's often because the photos are blurry or not detailed enough, so there isn't a clear ID possible. So what do we want to take photos of when we're posting to iNaturalist? It's really important that we get a photo of the full, so these are two separate observations. So we've got the full frond and a bit of its habitat. I would personally have liked to have taken another photo of this further away so you can get more of where it's living. So this one, you can see both of these ferns are growing out of leaf litter. The next thing you want to do is take a photo of the lowest pinnae, as making sure that you can see the inner pinnules. So those are the pinnules that are the closest to the stipe. And the reason why we want to take a photo of the lowest pinnae and those inner pinnules is there are certain ferns where that is the only way to tell if it's intermedia or spinulose, which is the evergreen wood fern and our spinulose wood fern. So with those, we're looking at the ones that are the closest to the stipe, and are they longer than the ones that are above it? So this one looks longer than this one, which means that it is the intermediate wood fern and not the spinulose, or it's the evergreen wood fern. Similarly, we are looking at branching structures. So this is what's called alternate branching, in that it's coming out over here, then it's coming out over here, then it's coming out over here, versus this would be more opposite or sub-opposite in that the branches are coming out very close to the same spot on the rachis. Again, close up of the stipe. This lets us see the groove as well as the scales, and gives us some more ID features. And then if it has sori or a fertile spike, we're also taking a close-up of those. Lookalikes. These are all things that I have been out on a fern hike and had somebody ask, is that a fern? Fern moss does look very fern-like. You will see it's got the same sort of branching structures, but it's tiny, tiny, tiny. And it will be growing in sort of a mat. Ostrich plume moss, this is one of my favorite mosses. It looks very much like a tiny ostrich fern, again, tiny, tiny. And if you come across this, it'll just be a bunch of triangle-shaped moss. It's very interesting to look at. This one, I don't think I've been on a single fern hike and not had somebody ask if this was a fern. It very much does look like a fern. This is Herb Robert. It has a tiny pink flower, which we know ferns don't have flowers unless they are magical. So we can rule this out, not a fern. It's actually a geranium. Squirrel corn, Dicentra, this also very frilly. I've had people ask if it was ferns. Again, we see this beautiful flower, so not a fern. Dicentra is a really interesting plant, though. It's one of our early spring ephemerals, which means it's one of the first ones to come up, and it has a symbiotic relationship with our bees. So Dicentra can be only buzz pollinated, meaning that it needs bees to survive, and the bees need it as an early food source. I once had somebody tell me really excitedly that they'd found a pink fern. I was racking my brain to try and figure out what it was, and it wasn't until I was out on the trail and saw some young wood betony that made me realize, this was likely what they saw. Wood betony You can see here it doesn't have any chlorophyll. It's not green at all because it is a hemiparasite. So at this stage, it's actually borrowing nutrients from the plants around it. So all these fern-like, but not ferns. Seasonality. Ferns will look different throughout the year. This is a young hartstongue fern. Also here you can see them, they're still in their fiddlehead stage. Here we can see the sori on the fern, and here they are once they've opened a bit more. They can be really tiny. This is a rattlesnake fern that is at the tip of my finger. It was the tiniest rattlesnake fern I've ever seen. Similarly, we've got a maidenhair fern here. Ferns, when they are new, can look really funky like this. They can be much harder to identify when they're young. So just be aware that if you come back to these ferns in a month, they will look completely different. Things to remember, please stay on the trail. Like I said before, all of these ferns can be found without stepping foot off of the trail. Here I am with a rare hartstongue fern, and my foot is currently on the trail. The trail goes right here. And that's one of the things where if we see a rare fern like this and it's in danger of being trampled on, we might move the trail just a little bit over to make sure that these rare species are protected. Being mindful of noxious plants like stinging nettle and poison ivy. Here we have some lovely ferns. It would be great to get a photo of what their stipe looks like. This is all poison ivy, so I did not get a closer photo of the stipe. Being mindful of whose home you're in. If you're going and you're lifting ferns, you're in the underbrush, be aware of rattlesnakes. Also be aware if you're standing quietly next to a fern, pouring through your guidebook to make sure that you're making noise occasionally, just so that bears are aware that you're there and you don't surprise each other. Again, please do not forage along the trail. Foraging is something that can be done in other places, but we ask that people don't do it on the trail. So staying on trail, I really like to stress how important it is to stay on the trail. It's very easy to want to just step off to quickly take a photo of something. Here's an example where I want you to look, see if there's anything that you think you should be careful of. I had somebody ask if this was poison ivy here. It's not, it's Jack in the pulpit. But what you do need to be careful of is the nest. So I'll go back a slide. This is a nest right here. It's a nest of a wren. They're a ground nesting bird, so they rely on camouflage. They rely on you not being able to see their nests as a way to protect them. So this is why we ask to please stay on the trail. Please keep your dogs leashed to protect these species. One of the joys of fern finding is that it makes you slow down and you'll end up seeing other critters that are also enjoying living in and around ferns. We've got a spring peeper here, a damselfly, a blind sphinx moth. This was the tiniest little redback salamander I've ever seen. We've got a cutworm moth here. I was taking a photo of a rare walrus and found this little guy who's having a snack of lichen in the background. And then similarly, we've got a newt here. So when you're looking at ferns, you'll be able to also see all these other little critters. Thank you so much. I hope that the next time you see a fern on the trail, you're able to take a moment, slow down, and just enjoy these incredible beings. Thank you very much. I'll pass it back to you, Ryan.
Well, thank you so much. That was such a lovely presentation, and I especially love your comments about slowing down. And I know you particularly have an affinity for the small and curious things along the trail. So thank you for sharing your perspective.
Thank you.
We'll move in to the Q&A section. So if anyone has any questions, You can use the Q&A function to type in your question, or you can raise your hand and we will unmute you so you can answer or ask your question. A few people also asking questions through the chat. See, Ruth is asking if you will be at the if you will be leading a fern hike at the hiking festival this year.
I certainly hope so. I will be back up in the peninsula for July and August as a conservation ambassador and would definitely love to lead some fern hikes. I usually do them around Hope Bay. If you're in the peninsula section and looking for ferns, Hope Bay is a great section of trail that has, I think the last time we did a hike, we saw 17 different species. So that's a great place, but I hope to come back to the hiking festival.
Awesome. I think you answered this question, but just to confirm, Karen asks, are there separate male and female ferns to produce eggs and sperm?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Are there separate male and female ferns to produce eggs and sperm?
No, so the gametophyte has both structures. Excuse me. And it has both male and female structures. They mature at slightly different times to avoid self-fertilization, but the gametophytes will fertilize another nearby gametophyte, and then the sporophyte will grow out of the female reproductive structures of the gametophyte.
Um, Question slash comment here from Marcia asking, they're saying, wonderful, Rhiannon. Are you perchance Irish? In Ireland, I went to Blarney Castle. There was a fern garden with 80 species, and I never got into the castle. You must visit.
That sounds amazing. I have probably some Irish ancestry, but I would love to go and visit that. That sounds fantastic.
Another question here from Karen, who is a hike leader, asking if you would be willing to come along on a group hike about ferns in your Iroquois or Toronto section.
I would love to do that. I am currently living in Toronto, and I am working out of the BTC office in Hamilton, so I would love to do either of those.
Um, Another comment to a question from Marcia. Constant mix-up of Christmas fern and holly fern. What's the easy difference?
Yeah, so I find at first, especially when they're young, I was having a lot of trouble with distinguishing them. Christmas fern does have a slight darker, more blue-green color to it than holly fern. Holly fern's definitely a lighter green. Uh, Christmas fern is also pinnate, whereas holly fern tends to be pinnatophyid in that it doesn't have completely separate pinnae. So that would be the sort of the main thing that I would look for with those.
Mike asks, are there species of ferns that are companions and need proximity to each other?
That's a really good question. That's actually one that I don't know the answer to. I know that there are ferns that you will find growing together because they like the same thing. So, maidenhair spleenwort as well as holly fern both like growing out of boulders. Excuse me. But I don't know. But that's something that I could ask our BTC ecologist for sure.
Yeah, fascinating question. Karen asks, she's wondering, is the fern guidebook available through the Owen Sound Field Naturalist website, or only available through the Owen Sound Natural Fields website?
I know that they sell it in a lot of bookstores on the peninsula, and I imagine Owen Sound area, but I'm not too sure about where else you can get it.
Cool. Tim says, very interesting. Thank you for your presentation. Just give another moment or two. Someone said bookstore in Tobermory has them. Marcia also said Fern Guide is on our website and it lists the locations as well. All right. If anyone has any other questions, we will include Rhiannon's contact in the follow-up email so you can reach out directly to them. But I think we'll wrap it up there if there's no further questions. So once again, Rhiannon, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your knowledge on ferns. It's such a great perspective into how we spend our time outside and along the trail. And I know it won't be long until we will all have the chance to start spotting ferns along the trails.
Yeah, thank
Uh,
you so much for having me. And I will say that there are ferns out there right now. Some of the photos that I shared of the walking fern and the green spleenwort, I found last time I was out on the trail. So we do have ferns that are evergreen, and you will be able to see them even in the winter. And my last thing that I want to say is just make sure it's fun, make sure you're enjoying it, do it with joy, and spread the joy with others. So I'm always happy to have people share exciting ferns that they found. So feel free to email me with your exciting fern findings as well. Thank you.
and thank you all for joining us again. Hopefully, we will see you at the next webinar on March 12th. Take care and have a great day. Bye.